Hey, it's Ryan, and before we jump into this episode, I have to let you know about something really cool. You are about to hear a wonderful mnemonic developed by Dr. Richard Hamilton, a toxicologist in Philadelphia, and told to us by Dr. Robert Basset, the Associate Medical Director of the Philadelphia Poison Center. This is a mnemonic all about poisonous mushrooms, the different toxins that are in them, and when they kick in. It's a useful tool to help us triage potential mushroom exposures. But I have something way more fun to tell you. I've actually developed a poisonous mushroom game named after this mnemonic. Yes, I know that is deeply nerdy, but it is also so much fun and it's sneakily educational. The game is called GOTAA, which features over 55 individual poisonous mushrooms. You get dealt a hand of different mushrooms and antidotes, and you can forage one of them. Then you pass your hand to the next player and get a new hand from someone else. You score points by collecting mushrooms with the same toxin in them. And because I'm a huge nerd, the scoring systems actually complement the toxins, where things that cause late toxicity get you points later, chronic toxicity builds up over time. There's actually 15 different ways to score. It's really fun. And you get bonus points by collecting antidotes for the mushrooms, grouping them by specific physical features or by places they grow in the world. If you've ever played the popular game Sushi Go, it's a lot like that. But instead of collecting sushi, you're collecting deadly mushrooms. And you get to learn more about them because the game was created by people who actually treat mushroom poisoning. It teaches you which mushrooms might be poisonous, basics about identification, where they're located, all the different toxins, their antidotes, and the organ systems they impact. But you don't need to know any of that in order to play. It's actually just a really fun game. I've beta tested it rigorously with my non-medical friends and family, whether they wanted to or not, but they all had an absolute blast playing. We're still working through production right now, so it's not ready for release yet, but you can still check it out. Go to the show notes or head to our website, thepoisonlab.com, and look for the GOTA PPICCEM link. It'll be on the right-hand side. There, you'll get to check out examples of cards from the game, and more importantly, you can sign up for the newsletter, which will let you know more about the game, when it's going to come out, and if we're going to do something like a pre-order. And supporting members of the Poison Lab are going to get early access and a discount code when it launches. Which I guess takes me to my second announcement, the part where I confess I'm officially out of free software trials and channel my inner NPR pledge drive. The Poison Lab is officially joining the world of listener-supported media. And honestly, that's a weird sentence for me to say out loud. I started this podcast because I just love the field of toxicology, and this helped me scratch that itch. And I wanted to share information that might help improve the care of poison patients, or at least let people know what poisons are out there. Because I just love making this show, the idea of it ever becoming funded was sort of foreign to me. And if I'm being honest, I've always had conflicting feelings about monetizing medical education. Although it does seem to be just about everywhere, from MRAP to MCRIT, curbsiders, you name it. It always made me think, do you really want to educate, or are you just in it for the sweet boat money? And here I am, 5 years later, totally boatless, and I get it now. I'm not buying a boat anytime soon, but those guys put out great content, not just because they're gifted clinicians, but they have the resources to do it regularly. I really want to grow this podcast. And it does cost money to make. Website hosting, audio software, recording gear, and actually now I'm working on something much bigger, a deep dive series on poisoning outbreaks. And for that, I actually need help from sound engineers and editors to make it sound as good as the story deserves. If I want that MRAP level quality, well, I need MRAP level funding. So that's actually why I started running ads on the show, which many of you have heard. But I know that's not everyone's favorite. So now there's just another option. Listener support. Starting at just $1 a month, or 2% of an annual MRAP subscription, you can become a Poison Lab supporting member at www.thepoisonlab.com/support. There's a link to it in the show notes. I will always keep this podcast free. No paywalls ever. That's non-negotiable. The whole point is to improve care for the next poison patient, and that should never cost anything to access. With this option, you can support me in making the show, and hopefully I can make more than one episode every 2 months, and you'll get benefits too. All episodes, like this one, ad-free, occasional bonus content, merch giveaways, and discounts on the GOTA PPICCEM game. Hopefully giving back some value for the value you find in the show. But here's the truth. You don't have to pay anything to support the show. Subscribing, leaving a review, sharing it with a friend, those are totally free, and they mean a lot in helping us share our message about caring for poison patients. So, however you choose to support it, at the end of the day, I'm just glad you're here. Thanks for being part of the community that makes this show so much fun. Okay, let's get to the episode. Hey everybody, you are listening to The Poison Lab, a show about poisoning for people who manage poisoning, and this is a mini episode. On our most recent episode of Toxicologists vs. the Internet, I talked with Dr. Amy Zosel about a number of different poisonings, and the topic of mushroom poisoning came up. We quickly ran through some important considerations for developing a differential, but it was not complete, and I didn't want to drag the show on by going through every single mushroom. So instead, I have an absolute expert here to help me, Dr. Robert Basset.
Rob Basset. I'm an emergency physician and a medical toxicologist, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Associate Medical Director for Philadelphia Poison Control at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia.
Dr. Basset is really a gifted medical educator, which you're about to hear. He also has his hands in a number of other medical education initiatives, like coaching med students on what specialty to choose. So check the show notes to see some links for where you can find more from Dr. Basset. But he and I were working on a separate project. Honestly, it's one I'm really excited to share with you, but it's not ready yet. It's going to be big, though, I promise. As we were working on that project, I happened to be recording, and this topic came up, and he rattled off a fantastic mnemonic, not only to remember all of the toxic mushrooms, but how to remember their clinical syndromes in a way that you'll be able to identify them should a patient present. And since I was recording, we have it. So you're going to hear it now, live. So without further ado, let's hear from Dr. Basset.
So I will say I have a vested interest in, teaching about all things toxicologic. So forgive me if I start to geek out a little bit about, way to learn these things. But for the mushroom enthusiasts, especially people in the medical community who have an obligation to be aware of this or might be in the position to take care of this, something that can help you remember them when you get woken up on a Saturday night, a mnemonic called GOTA PPICCEM. How clever is that? And I will pay a quick nod of gratitude and homage to one of the most famous toxicologists in the Philadelphia area, Rich Hamilton, who's a former fellowship director and chair of the Drexel University program, who published a mnemonic for remembering toxic mushrooms. And one of the great things about this, unlike just trying to remember, the names in the back of your head, he categorized them based on the time of onset of symptoms, which, spoiler alert, is really the sort of linchpin in how we decide which ones are the most life-threatening. And I'll just cut right to the chase and say, in general, the age-old teaching is if you start to develop symptoms very quickly, it's usually inversely proportional to the toxicity. In other words, the least worrisome are the ones that start to show symptoms the quickest. Somebody consumes a mushroom and they start to get vomiting and diarrhea very quickly within 6 hours, that's usually reassuring, as opposed to somebody who's fine or for an extended period of time and then develops symptoms after 6 hours. Those are the ones we get really concerned about because mechanistically, the ones that are implicated are the most toxic mushrooms. So let me run through it really quick. So the GOTA PPICCEM. So G is for Gyromitra or Gyromitra esculenta, which is also the false morel. Morel mushroom is a delicacy, and this is one of those mushrooms that gets confused for an edible mushroom, occasionally gets mistaken for the morel, and unfortunately can be very, very toxic. And long story short, it depletes an important cofactor, and it can lead to seizures, which can be very, very dangerous. The next in the GOTA PPICCEM is O for Orellanine, and that's the toxin that's associated with Cortinarius species. So the Cortinarius species is known to cause renal failure.
This mushroom is nicknamed the deadly Cortinarius, or the deadly Cort. It's the O in GOTA PPICCEM because it contains Orellanine, the toxin that causes kidney failure. It's associated with horses because the author of the book The Horse Whisperer was poisoned by a deadly Cortinarius and ended up needing a kidney transplant from his daughter. He went on to live a happy life and eventually died of a heart attack in 2022. His book, The Horse Whisperer, was actually converted to a movie with Robert Redford.
Continuing on that same horse theme, if you will, the T, so we're up to GOT. GOT is Tricholoma equestre, and this is, the one that causes muscle breakdown. This is another one of those mushrooms that usually doesn't develop symptoms very quickly.
Tricholoma equestre is sometimes called the man on horseback or the yellow knight. I like to picture a yellow knight riding a horse and getting rhabdo from his vigorous exercise. That's at least one strange way that you can remember its toxicity.
And the fourth one in that category of ones that have delayed onset or also associated with the most severe toxicity is the granddaddy of them all, Amatoxin. Amatoxin from the Amanita species and the Galerina species. And this is the one that causes liver toxicity. And the ones who do die are usually from Amatoxin. And this is the one not to fool around with. So if you can only remember four, the ones that have that delayed onset, GOTA, the first portion of the GOTA PPICCEMs, are the ones that I get most concerned about. So the PPICCEM, PPICEM, the first one is psilocybin or psilocin, the sort of psychedelic mushrooms that cause like an LSD effect. Those can, present early on with some GI distress and some psychogenic abnormalities, typically not anywhere near life-threatening. The I in PPICCEM is ibotenic acid, and this comes from Amanita muscaria, the fly agaric, the Mario Brothers mushroom of infamy. A lot of people don't realize that can be psychedelic. Interestingly, has sort of two toxins associated with it. Ibotenic is the first one, very like stimulant-like effect, but it also gets converted into muscimol, which has more of a GABA-like effect, so like a sedating effect.
So the fly agaric, or Amanita muscaria, the typical toadstool mushroom you've seen in Mario, contains ibotenic acid and muscimol. Dr. Basset did a great job explaining this in the original audio, but I accidentally cut the file and we don't have it all. What he's saying is ibotenic acid acts like a stimulant and muscimol affects GABA. So it's basically a speedball in a mushroom, an upper and a downer. So you can see symptoms of hyperexcitation and agitation, as well as drowsiness and coma.
The C is for coprine, the coprine species, or the inky caps often is referred to. And these are the ones that cause a disulfiram-like reaction. So if you consume alcohol with them, you can get a disulfiram-like reaction, which again is very, very uncomfortable, but not necessarily life-threatening. E for emesis, little brown mushrooms. And there's just tons and tons of them out there that cause GI distress. So a lot of times, these are the ones that are like kids or people out in the yard will pick some brown mushrooms, eat them, start throwing up pretty quickly and come in. And that's it. It's usually a self-limited disease, very, very reassuring, but often presents early on in, after their exposure.
These are the mushrooms we call LBMs, or little brown mushrooms, and frequently they're neither little nor brown. It's just a catch-all phrase that we have for mushrooms that cause rapid onset diarrhea and nausea and vomiting, but no other symptoms. Jack-o'-lantern mushroom, false parasols, the sickener, which is Rusula emetica. It looks bad, but then usually afterwards they do okay. But
yeah, and I like the naming, the nomenclature. Like we should definitely distinguish between something called the sickener and the death cap. Like totally different. I like that. That's nice. It really implies what what the toxicity is like. And then the M is for muscarine, and these are the muscarinic like mushrooms like clitosabe or inosabe that create like a cholinergic crisis, so like your sludgy symptoms.
These ones are commonly called bluet mushrooms or sometimes fool's funnels. While we said that the late onset toxicity mushrooms are the ones we worry about, that's not entirely the case. These ones, muscarine containing, can also be fatal. In fact, past guests of the show, Dr. Amy Zosel, our most recent guest, and Dr. Matthew Stanton, one of our very first Talks Versus the Internet guests, published a fatal case report when a couple went out foraging and ate some clitosabes. They developed a cholinergic crisis, and unfortunately, one of them died. They actually pulled the mushroom cap out on autopsy and did spore printing to confirm it. I'll put a link to that case report in the show notes. But cholinergic crisis, as anyone in the tox world knows, is no laughing matter, as it's the same syndrome you would see with nerve gas or organophosphate poisoning. Luckily, it develops rapidly, so we can usually identify this toxicity quickly and intervene as long as they're in healthcare.
So just for the sake of completion, the GOTAs, the GOTAs, are the ones that happen after 6 hours. The PPICCEMs are the ones that happen before 6 hours. And although I said GOTA PPICCEM was the whole mnemonic, one thing I didn't tell you was that the A in GOTA is squared, so there's two A's, and the P in PPICCEM is squared because there's two P's. So the A is actually GOTAA, and that second A and this second P actually refers to those middle mushrooms. So the ones that can start early, but also cause significant toxicity. So the ones that can actually start early, but still portend worse prognosis.
Dr. Basset is hammering in on this because these are rule breakers. We use the timing of nausea to help us determine whether or not this will be a big deal. Usually late nausea also means late organ injury, and early nausea with nothing else means no big deal. But these few mushrooms can cause early nausea and late organ injury.
That second A stands for Alethic-Norlucine or Amanita smithiana. But Amanita smithiana, is the one that causes early GI distress and then, subsequently renal failure. And this is the one that's fortunately in the US, primarily located in the Pacific Northwest. But for the same reasons, I've learned to not say I don't need to know how to take care of cobra envenomations in Philadelphia because things travel. Anybody can get anything these days. And then that second P, the Paxillus species, can cause early symptoms, but also cause devastating organ issues. And that's the Paxillus syndrome, which is hepatic and renal toxicity, and then also a hemolytic anemia as part of that syndrome.
While Alethic-Norlucine can be found in several mushrooms on the West Coast, including Amanita smithiana, proxima, and abrupta, the Paxillus species is fortunately in another country, not to say it can't be imported here. The Alethic-Norlucine mushrooms are sometimes confused for edible matsutake mushrooms, however, and there are misfortune cases here in the U.S.
So that Paxillus is another one not to be played with, as it can cause pretty dramatic effects, and that's GOTAA in a nutshell.
I think that's the most useful mnemonic I've ever heard. Thank you so much, Dr. Basset, for actually unknowingly joining the show and breaking down mushroom toxicity in a really easy to digest and clinically useful way. Check the show notes for a link to Dr. Richard Hamilton's website, which goes over the written GOTA-PPICCEM mnemonic. One more time, just for some spaced repetition, G is for Gyromitrin, which causes late nausea and seizures from inhibition of GABA production. O is for Orellanine, which is found in the deadly Cortinarius and causes renal failure, which it did to the author of the book, The Horse Whisperer. T is for Tricholoma equestre, which is called the man on horseback, and it causes rhabdomyolysis. A is for Amatoxin-containing mushrooms, and there are many throughout the entire United States. Amanita virosa, Galerina, Lepiota, and Amanita phalloides are just a few, and they're aptly named things like the evil Bubalini, the funeral bell, the destroying angel, and the death cap. These cause late nausea and late liver failure that leads to death, and they're the number one cause of death from mushrooms in the United States. Then we move on to the ones that can cause early symptoms, including the A for Alethic-Norlucine, which you're going to find in Amanita smithiana, proxima, and abrupta. The common names of those mushrooms are actually pretty boring. It's Smith's Amanita or the proximal bulb Amanita, but they're really only a problem for people on the West Coast when they get mistaken for matsutake mushrooms, and they cause late renal failure after their early GI symptoms. Then we have the first P in PPICCEM is for the Paxillus species, which is in another continent but can cause multiple organ injuries, including a hemolytic anemia. Our second P of the PPICCEM are psilocybin-containing mushrooms, which I think most people are familiar with their effects here in the United States, as psilocybin is being explored as a potential therapeutic option for things like depression. If you want to know more about that, check out episode 25, The Poison Lab Does Psilocybin. I is for ibotenic acid and muscimol, which are found in the fly agaric mushroom, also known as Amanita muscaria, the typical mushroom you see in any sort of artwork that has mushrooms, a red cap with white spots. This causes stimulant and sedative effects and is used for its euphoric properties. C is for coprine-containing mushrooms. These are found in inky caps, which are mushrooms with shaggy black heads that tend to auto-digest themselves and look like they contain black ink. Coprine works similar to disulfiram and inhibits ethanol metabolism at the acetaldehyde stage, increasing acetaldehyde concentrations and making people feel pretty icky. E stands for emesis, which are all the little brown mushrooms that are neither little or brown, but the ones that cause rapid vomiting or diarrhea, but little else that we need to worry about, and there's hundreds of these. Common ones include jack-o'-lanterns, Russula emetica, and the false parasol. Finally, the M stands for muscarine-containing mushrooms, aptly named as it was the compound that helped identify muscarinic acetylcholine receptors, and thus they stimulate those exact receptors, leading to a cholinergic crisis. Clitosobes and inosobes are the two primary mushroom species that we see, and they are called bluets or fool's funnels. And, as Dr. Basset said, that's GOTA-PPICCEM in a nutshell. Remember, there's old mushroom hunters and bold mushroom hunters, but there's no old bold mushroom hunters, and all mushrooms are edible, but some only once. If you liked what you were listening to today, one thing you could do right now to support us is rate the show wherever you're listening to podcasts. Even leave a comment about what you like or don't like. It helps us make the show better for you and reach other people interested in learning about toxicology. You can always follow the show on social media, where we do release information about all new episodes. We are on Blue Sky at empoisonfarmd.bsky.social, on Twitter at empoisonfarmd, and the show is at @labpoison, on Instagram at @tox_talk, and on Facebook, The Poison Lab. Even better, if you want to hear about updates from the show, go to our website, www.thepoisonlab.com, and sign up for our newsletter so you can get messages straight from Toxo, alerting you about every episode with a freshly made summary, and even providing some extras. All of the current subscribers just got a news flash highlighting phenibut, tianeptine, kratom, and nitrous oxide trends that were published in the 2023 America's Poison Center's annual report that I help author. And there might be some hints of a blog coming soon, so it's a great place to stay informed about those kinds of things if you want to stay informed on trends in toxicology. Lastly, if you had something that you wish we would have talked about, or you want to let us know we said something wrong, or just share a tidbit about how something we said resonated with you, you can reach the show anytime at toxtalk1@gmail.com. That's TOXTALK1@gmail.com, and we love getting messages from the listeners. I promise you, they all get read, even if we don't have time to respond to each one. Okay, that'll do it for this episode. Thanks for listening, and I hope we can catch you next time. Hey, Toxo, can you play us out? You can use your old voice module if you want.
The information on this show is for educational purposes only and should not be interpreted as medical advice or treatment recommendations. Contact your doctor for health questions or call your local poison center at 1-800-222-1222. This show is owned by Clinical Toxicology LLC. It's haphazardly written, produced, and somehow hosted by Ryan Feldman, who promises he's trying his best. The views and opinions expressed on this show are solely those of the host, and in no way reflect the opinions of any organizations affiliated with him. They probably wish we'd remind you of that more often. Okay, that's all for now, Toxicolleagues. Don't forget to give it a share with your nerdy friends. Cheerio, mates. See you next time.